The earth trembled beneath the weight of something ancient, something terrifying. It wasn't just a creature. It was an embodiment of chaos itself, a force of nature so monstrous that the seas whisper its name in fear. It was called Leviathan, rising from the deep, dark waters of the ancient seas. Leviathan had roamed for centuries, devouring, destroying, and leaving behind a trail of fear and destruction. With scales like iron, teeth like sword, and eyes that burn with an unholy fire, it was a terror of all creation. But what made it truly dangerous wasn't its size or its strength. It was its ability to breathe chaos into the world around it. Wherever Leviathan swam, the seas would churn, the winds would howl, and storms would rise as if the world itself feared its presence. No one dared challenge it. But on the horizon, there was a change. A storm unlike any other began to form. It wasn't a natural storm. This was a storm of divine wrath. In the heavens, God sat on his throne, watching the earth below. He had watched the Leviathan for ages, seen the destruction it brought, seen the nations that it swallowed in fear. And he knew it was time to end the reign of chaos. Time to show creation that no force of evil, no matter how powerful, could stand against his will. And so he moved. With a command, he called upon his might and descended from his celestial throne. The heavens opened as the light of the Almighty cut through the storm clouds, a beacon of unyielding power. God was coming to destroy Leviathan. The sea rumbled, the earth shaking as the massive form of Leviathan broke the surface. It reared its head, its eyes glowing with malice, its mouth opening wide to release a terrifying roar that echoed across the ocean. The waves parted before it as it moved, a symbol of its dominion over the waters. But as the creature rose from the depths, something mighty and divine appeared above the sea. It was God himself, descending like a lightning storm from the heavens, radiating such brilliance that the very air around him crackled with power. The sea, once ruled by Leviathan, parted before him as if acknowledging its true king. Leviathan's eyes locked onto the figure descending from the sky. It roared, preparing to face the invader. But this time, its roar would not be enough. It charged, its massive jaws snapping, teeth sharp enough to pierce mountains. God raised his hand, and the sea grew still. Time seemed to halt. The massive beast lunged toward him, its power building as it approached with the fury of the ocean itself. Then, in a split second, God's wrath was unleashed. A blast of divine light surged from his hand. It collided with Leviathan in a cataclysmic explosion of energy. The beast recoiled, its skin sizzling and cracking under the pure force of the Almighty's touch. The air around it grew hot, as though the sea itself was burning. Leviathan writhed, thrashing in pain, but God was relentless. The very water that had once been its home now became its prison, boiling around it as its scales began to melt away. With one final strike of his hand, God sent a thunderous wave that crashed down on Leviathan. The beast let out a final, blood-curdling roar before it was silenced. At that moment, the ocean fell still, and the earth seemed to breathe again. The Leviathan, the creature of chaos, was no more. The seas, which had once been ruled by fear and destruction, now lay calm. The storm that had ravaged the world for so long had subsided, and with it, the shadow of Leviathan. The creatures of the deep, once in constant fear, now swam freely, and the world was at peace. But the peace was not just in the oceans. It spread throughout the world. The land, which had trembled under the weight of chaos, now stood firm. The winds no longer howled with fury. God had not only defeated Leviathan, he had restored order to creation. In the days that followed, people marveled at the power of the Almighty. Kings and nations who had once been afraid to speak his name now bowed in reverence. God had shown them that no force of evil, no matter how ancient or powerful, could ever stand against him. But God's victory was not just over a beast. It was a reminder to all of creation. Chaos, fear, and evil will always bow to God's will. He alone is the master of the seas, the storms, and all of existence. And as for Leviathan, its name would never be spoken again, for it had been erased from existence by the hand of God. Moral of the story: the destruction of Leviathan wasn't just a victory over a sea creature. It was a symbol of God's ultimate power over the forces of chaos. Nothing, not even the most terrifying creatures, can stand against the will of the Almighty. This story reminds us that no matter the challenges or forces of evil we face, God's sovereignty reigns supreme.